In the scorching heat of Kano, Nigeria, 17-year-old Umaru sneaked out of his house, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. His parents, staunch supporters of government, would never approve of his decision to join the youth protest against bad governance. But Umaru couldn't stay silent anymore. As he made his way through the narrow streets, he received a cryptic message from an unknown number. Meet us at the old mosque at midnight. Come alone. Umaru's animosity was piqued. At midnight, he arrived at the mosque, where a group of young protesters, their faces hidden behind masks, awaited him. They handed him a placard that read, "Enough is enough," and a mask to conceal his identity. As they marched toward the government house, Umaru noticed they were being trailed by a mysterious figure in a black hoodie. Suddenly, the figure vanished into thin air. The protesters reached the government house, where they were met with a battalion of armed police officers. Umaru's heart skipped a beat as the officers charged towards them. In the chaos, Umaru lost sight of his fellow protesters. He was grabbed by the mysterious figure, who revealed himself to be a journalist documenting the protest. Together, they escaped through a hidden passage. As they caught their breath, the journalist handed Umaru a recording device. "This contains evidence of the government's corruption. Get it to the media," he urged before disappearing into the night. Umaru returned home, his parents oblivious to his adventure. But he knew his life had changed forever. He had become a part of something bigger than himself. The fight for a better Nigeria. The protest had been brewing for months, sparked by the government's blatant disregard for the welfare of its citizens. Corruption, poverty, and inequality had become the norm. The youths, tired of being silent and marginalized, decided to take a stand. Umaru, a bright and charismatic student, had lost his best friend, Ali, to a preventable accident due to the country's poor health care system. The tragedy ignited a fire within him, and he began secretly mobilizing his peers. They formed a group, the New Dawn, and started brainstorming ways to bring attention to their plight. They used social media, encrypted messaging apps, and clandestine meetings to coordinate their efforts. Their leader, a fearless and passionate young woman named Mariam, had lost her family business to the government's reckless policies. She brought strategic thinking and determination to the group. Together, they planned a series of protests, starting with a march on the government house. They created placards, banners, and slogans, all calling for change. They reached out to local artists, musicians, and influencers to amplify their message. The night before the protest, Umaru received the cryptic message that led him to the old mosque, where he met the mysterious journalist. The journalist, who had been tracking the government's corruption, offered to help the youths get their message to a wider audience. As the protest unfolded, the government responded with force, but the youths stood firm. They had planned for this, using non-violent resistance tactics and cleverly evading the authorities. Umaru's role in the protest became crucial when he received the recording device containing evidence of the government's corruption. He knew he had to get it to the media, but the journey would be treacherous. Umaru knew he had to act fast. He contacted a trusted friend, Amira, a tech-savvy activist, to help him decode the recording device. They arranged a secret meeting at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Kano. As they worked on unlocking the device, they heard footsteps outside. The door burst open, and a group of armed men dressed in black stormed in. Umaru and Amira were caught off guard, but just as all hope seemed lost, the mysterious journalist appeared. disarming the men and leading Umaru and Amira to safety. "I have been tracking your progress," he said. "It's time to get the evidence to the media." He handed Umaru a small USB drive containing the decoded recordings. "Meet me at the old clock tower at midnight. We will get this to the press." Umaru made his way back home, his heart racing with anticipation. He knew the risks were high, but he also knew that this could be the turning point for their movement. At midnight, he arrived at the clock tower, where the journalist introduced him to a prominent investigative journalist who had been tracking the government's corruption for years. Together, they released the evidence to the press, exposing the government's wrongdoings to the nation. The protests grew in strength, and the government was forced to listen. The evidence sparked widespread outrage, and the protests intensified. The government, desperate to maintain control, deployed more troops to quell the demonstrations, but the youth stood firm, refusing to back down. Umaru, now a prominent figure in the movement, received a chilling message from an unknown number. "You are next on the list." He knew he had to be careful, but he couldn't let fear silence him. The mysterious journalist, who had become a trusted ally, offered Umaru protection. Together, they went into hiding, continuing to coordinate the protest from secret locations. Meanwhile, Mariam, the leader of the New Dawn, was arrested during a peaceful march. The government tried to use her as a scapegoat, but it only fueled the flames of resistance. Umaru and the journalist hatched a plan to rescue Mariam and expose the government's brutality. They gathered a small team of trusted activists, and under the cover of night, they infiltrated the heavily guarded detention center. With the journalist's expertise and Umaru's bravery, they managed to free Mariam and escape undetected. The government's grip on power was beginning to slip. Mariam's rescue was a turning point in the movement. The government, desperate to regain control, announced a state of emergency, imposing curfew and restrictions on gatherings, but the youths refused to back down. They organized underground rallies, using secret codes and hidden locations to evade the authorities. Umaru, Mariam, and the mysterious journalist became the faces of the resistance, their names etched in the minds of the people. They traveled from city to city, mobilizing support and spreading their message of hope and change. As the movement gained momentum, the government's tactics grew more brutal. Umaru's family received threatening messages, warning them to disown their son, but they stood by him, proud of his courage. One night, as Umaru and Mariam addressed a secret gathering, the mysterious journalist appeared, his eyes gleaming with a hint of triumph. "We have a chance to end this," he whispered. "A high-ranking official is willing to testify against the government. We can bring them down." But as they celebrated this breakthrough, the sound of sirens pierced the air. The authorities had tracked them down. The team was ambushed, surrounded by heavily armed soldiers. Umaru, Mariam, and the journalist were dragged away, thrown into a dark, damp cell. But the mysterious journalist had one last trick up his sleeve. He revealed himself to be the high-ranking official's son, seeking revenge for his father's imprisonment. With his help, they escaped the cell, making their way to a secret location where the official was waiting. The official, a powerful minister, had grown disillusioned with the government's corruption and was ready to testify. Together, they recorded the minister's testimony, exposing the government's crimes to the world. The video went viral, sparking widespread outrage and calls for resignation. The government, cornered and desperate, launched a final attack on the protesters. But the youths, empowered by the minister's testimony, stood firm. Umaru, Mariam, and their fellow activists led the charge. marching towards the government house. The soldiers, sensing the tide had turned, hesitated. The soldiers, realizing the futility of their actions, slowly backed down. The protesters, now a sea of determined faces, surged forward. Umaru, Mariam, and the minister led the charge, marching straight into the government house. The president, cornered and defeated, emerged from his office, flanked by his aides. He tried to speak, but his words were drowned out by the chanting crowd. Umaru, his voice ringing out across the hall, declared, "We the people demand change. We demand justice. We demand a new Nigeria." The crowd erupted in cheers as the president, his power crumbling, resigned on the spot. The minister's testimony was broadcast on national TV, exposing the government's corruption to the entire nation. Umaru, Mariam, and their fellow activists had sparked a revolution, bringing hope to a nation on the brink of collapse. They had shown that even in the darkest times, courage, determination, and unity could bring out change. As the crowd celebrated, Umaru looked around, his eyes shining with pride. He knew that this was just the beginning, a new dawn for Nigeria, where the voices of the people would be heard. Thank you for watching today's episode. I truly appreciate your support. Always stop by to watch more interesting African stories in this channel. Do not forget to like and leave your comment on the comment sections, as it helps the channel to grow. Also subscribe and turn on the bell notification so that you will be the first to be notified of my new upload. Remember, subscription is free. Until my next upload, bye.